Hi, I'm Nick Kazvini-Gore, Head of Government Affairs at Applied Intuition. I'm thrilled to be joined by Steve Rodriguez, who is a not only a leader in the defense innovation community, but a member of our Defense Advisory Board and also Executive Director of the Atlantic Council Commission on Software-Defined Warfare. Thanks for joining.
It's great to be here.
Now, you've attended Nexus a couple of years now. You've seen the company
Right.
grow. I'd be interested in your thoughts on having attended Nexus this year. What are some of
Mm.
your reflections as it relates to software-defined vehicles, DoD
Mm.
software?
Well, it's been interesting. So originally, when Applied started doing these events, it was more about helping the landscape, Washington D.C., the Department of Defense, Congress, understand the company and also the issues of the company that being applied is trying to address. It certainly seems this year that the level of discourse has become much more sophisticated, much less about general topics of autonomy and much more focused on the application of autonomy to certain systems and capabilities. So the discussions today, even I've been in several of the panels so far. Those discussions have been very nuanced in terms of uh, less discussion around problems, complaining about why things aren't the way they
Yeah.
are, and much more focused on specific solutions. Even there have been several instances where panelists have made policy proposals that
Yeah.
could, companies like Applied or others could address immediately, and that was a surprise to me.
Yeah, that's great. We had a panel that I moderated with Congressman Whitman,
Sure.
and a member of Congress operating at this level was mentioning the difference between firm fixed price contracts and
Yeah.
time and materials. It's to your point, it's we've come a long way, and part of that progress also is associated with the Defense Innovation Unit.
Yep.
They've gotten a lot of authorities thanks to Congress, but also a lot of money.
Mm-hmm.
And so, that money hit a couple months ago.
Mm-hmm.
They're now trying to execute on that.
Right.
In addition to being, in your other leadership roles, you're also a founder of an
Yep.
investor of One Defense. So you see it from that angle too.
Yep.
What are your thoughts on how DIU is doing with that money, those
Mm.
authorities? What more can they be doing?
So another new thing is the creation of, you mentioned Congressman Whitman. He and Congressman Ryan and others have now created a
Oh
Defense
yeah,
Modernization Caucus, right?
yeah,
That's new, and that's kind of important because that allows issues like the ones that we all care about to get better treatment on the Hill in terms of not one-off policy proposals, but a broader suite of legislative priorities and action
yeah,
that can be implemented together instead of a la carte, kind of the salami slicing
yeah.
ideas of in investable technologies or solutions. This relates to the question you just raised because I think DIU it still has a lot of promise. They just got a lot of money, belatedly. They got a lot of money, but the question remains: what is their strategy? They have a lot of new leadership. Right, this leadership is getting in place. They're still hiring people. I think they're still wrestling with, and I've yet to see a coherent strategy writ large on how they're going to uh, deploy their congressionally appropriated funds
Yeah.
against what set of priorities, right?
Yeah.
And that's difficult because the organization today, the success they've had, Nick, has been focused on essentially being a rapid contracting shop at
Yeah.
their core. That's still their superpower. There's nothing wrong with that, but what they need to focus on now is leveling up beyond just moving money quickly and more putting together a coherent set of strategic priorities themselves.
Yeah, definitely. And I think the question is also, I mean, Applied Intuition is a success story for DIU.
Yeah.
We got, I think in our first year, on contract, a DIU contract with a
Mm-hmm.
real program of record, the Robotic Combat Vehicle program.
Right.
Now the question is, yeah, with DIU having its own money,
Mm-hmm.
what's the focus? Is it de-risking technologies for program offices? They also have
Mm-hmm.
money for combatant command. So is
Yeah.
it is it focused on COCOM requirements?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, what should I mean you're an authority in this space. What
Mm-hmm.
what should they be looking at?
So I've been around the hoop on DIU, or it used to be called DIUX,
Yeah.
since its inception. I helped co-found Ensign, what's now called Ensign, the National Security Innovation Network. The long pole in the tent with innovation, Nick, it's not just dollars on contract. Obviously, that's important for all of us. But it's always been the what's called the T&E, or test and evaluation community. This is still the case, unfortunately. There's been relatively little treatment given to solving things like availability of government ranges to test set equipment. And especially when you start talking about the software-defined vehicles, software-defined warfare, you don't get that if you can't test the bloody things you're trying to field. Right? At some point, someone's got to actually put it through its paces and test it. And right now, that's still kind of a moribund sector in this space. No one's talking about it, and yet that's the thing that's going to jam us up.
Yeah, not only testing of the hardware, but the testing of the software
Right.
as well. Yeah.
Right.
And that's one of the main focuses of your commission at the Atlantic Council. Again, looking at software-defined warfare. What are some of the commercial best practices that the commission has uncovered?
So we're still in relative early days here in terms of scoping out what is a very, very broad topic.
Yeah.
The idea behind software-defined warfare, which clearly you guys appreciate, is to level up discussions around technology, including autonomy, and not have it just be a discussion around technology, which I think is of interest to a lot of people, but to level it up to a truly discussion around strategy. So what the commission is not focused on is relitigating the national security strategy or the national defense strategy, which have recently been promulgated, right? Even if we wanted to, there's no point in doing that. So what we're trying to do, like all of us, is good American citizens, say, right, we have our marching orders, right? The words are on paper. Yet the challenge is, how do we go from words on paper to actual capability into the battlefield? That's come up repeatedly in panels today.
Yeah.
And that's where things fall down on their face, because we have a history of making statements of what we're going to do as a country. But then when you look at the capability, software-defined warfare, right?
Yeah.
The capability to meet those needs, especially in the near term. This has come up several times today.
Yeah.
In the near term, there's no cavalry coming to save us. So the focus on this commission is on using elite software to update legacy hardware systems. Also looking at new programs where they can be designed with software at their core instead of hardware. And then the third is upgrading and modernizing what we call the digital enterprise. So what the heck does all that mean? What this really means is there are kind of two ways of being when you look at a broad commission or a study or even a company focused on software. One is, how do we put, and this is a colloquial term, how do we put warheads on foreheads faster?
Yeah.
Right? That's one way of being. The other way of being is what I call Defense Digital 2.0, right? So this looks like, the first panel talked about fix our computers, right? How do we make mundane things like our computer load times faster?
Yeah.
How do we reform the defense travel service? Like really boring things that no one seems to care about, but they jam all of us up and they demoralize the force.
Yeah.
So that's how we're viewing the world from the commission's perspective.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of talk about the F-35 program, but you're right. Like, I'm sure a lot of the service members are thinking, can someone fix my computers?
Yes.
On the F-35 program, the congressman really, not only did he have some strong words on the program, public words, but he also in the NDA had some language that's going to fence off some of the planes until the software can be fixed or can be more quickly updated. Yeah, what are your thoughts on that hallmark, the most expensive program, and also, more importantly, we don't have to talk about the politics of F-35, but what are the lessons learned to drive on the new programs?
I think one of the easiest things, and this is a contentious issue, right? So I'm not proposing to have all the answers on this. But I do think one of the easiest things to address is the issue around data rights.
Yes.
Who owns the data that goes into these programs, and who owns the data that comes off these programs? This has been written about, and this is a challenge, not just for the government, in this case, the Joint Program Office or F-35. This is also a challenge for the contracting and defense industrial base workforce that's working on the F-35.
Yeah.
Depending on who owns the data, that can make it easier or more difficult for legacy or what they call heritage members of the defense industrial base to work on these programs and this is key, in a price competitive way. And of course, new entrants to the market. There was a discussion earlier around why we even have authority to operate. Right.
Right.
This is another
Yeah.
example. You can talk all you want about getting new commercial entrants into the space. You can push money out the door faster, as AFWorks and DIU have done very, very well.
Yeah.
You can solve the T&E challenge, and yet if you don't solve something that flies under the radar, like who owns the data, then you don't frankly get autonomy, or you don't get autonomy in a way that's rapid and affordable enough to be something that benefits the warfighter, which at least I thought was what we were all trying to do.
Yeah. Well, there's the tension between vendor lock and
Right.
government off the shelf solutions, which are
Sure.
also not more often than not part of
Right.
the solution, right?
Yep.
So that's an ongoing challenge. I wanted to ask one more question of you. If you put on your investor hat for a second, there's been a big surge, thankfully, in
Yeah.
the defense tech community. As you said, like 3 years ago, those conversations were starting, and we are where we are.
Right.
A lot of these, there's a lot of people say that, the TAM or maybe the serviceable addressable market for DoD
Sure.
is like $800 billion. That's what some people have said. Obviously, like a lot of that money is locked away
Yeah.
and won't go to software. So the
Yeah.
TAM for software is probably a lot less.
Yeah.
Are there any concerns that, not that there's a defense tech bubble, but should we be more like moderate in our expectations of where we are and where we're going to go?
I think there's a lot of attention paid to some of the initial success stories, and you can rattle them off. Palantir,
Yeah.
Anduril, you could say Shield, and I mean, frankly, a number of the companies, in the Andreessen's American Dynamism portfolio, obviously, of which you guys are, arguably the biggest success story in that space. And yet, almost all of them are wrestling with a critical issue of getting the program of record.
Correct.
So where have I seen the sophistication grow in this space is particularly on the government relations savviness of a lot of these companies, to be candid. They initially, when the third offset strategy, which generated DIUX and all this other innovation kicked off, it was very much kind of, hey, can we win a SIBR or a non-dilutive research grant? Or even could we win an OTA, right? That can supposedly solve all our problems. But I think what they realize is actually, if you can't articulate a clear path to solving a major program of record need, or a need that a program of record could be built around, ACAT 3 to ACAT 1 level program, that's code for lots of money for the audience. Then investors aren't going to back you, and they're savvy enough now to where the investors will understand that. So now if you roll up and you say, I've got this great thing, it's going to solve all these problems, and you can't point to some path to getting from your prototype to a major investable milestone, then no one's going to give you money.
It's also interesting to see a lot of these software-defined companies lean more heavily into hardware, because that's what the department buys. But the interesting thing as an investor, though, the margins on hardware are like 2 to 1, maybe 3 to 1 versus software. You're not going to get those same margins.
And what you're going to see going forward, I saw this happen with one of the companies I just mentioned, is I'm seeing more and more defense tech companies buying what I call services revenue. So they'll bid on services revenue, which is lower margin, but the goal, they're doing it, I hope, for a very specific reason, which is to grow their top line revenue. So then they can use that to kind of back their way into a software valuation. Right. So if you raise money and you're like, hey, we're a $1 billion company, but if you go to an investor and you say, hey, I've got, if I want to be intellectually pure and say I've got $3 million in annual recurring revenue or ARR, that doesn't sound that great. But if you go to them and say it's $3 million of like actual product ARR, and then you have another 20 or 30 million in services revenue, usually what the founders, because I do this myself, is the founders roll up and say, we've got 30 or 33 million in revenue. And of course the VC says, oh, that sounds great. That sounds like $1 billion company. So I'm being a little, coy and candid here, but I do think that is something that happens a lot more than we think.
Yeah.
Nothing wrong with that if the companies can actually ultimately get the program of record
Yeah.
and are indeed a success story.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I want to thank you for coming to Nexus all these years. I want to thank you for being on our advisory board.
Sure.
And thanks for doing this talk. Yeah,
Yeah.
really appreciate it.
It's great to be with you.